Josh Hader has been one of the best relief pitchers in all of Major League Baseball over the past couple years, which is saying something. Relievers are often really volatile, and the fact that Hader's been as dominant as he has been just goes to show you how valuable of a player he is. Now, after amassing 5 All-Star Game appearances, a top 10 Cy Young Award finish, and 3 National League Reliever of the Year awards, Josh Hader is officially a free agent for the first time in his 7-year Major League career. Hader is without a doubt the best relief pitcher on the open market this year, and he's in line for a massive payday. That's just further supported by the fact that the Padres extended him a qualifying offer, which this year is over $20 million, and he rejected it. Fortunately for the Padres, they'll get a compensation pick at the end of the 4th round since he didn't take that offer, but they're most likely not getting him back. I'm sure most people remember near the end of the season when Josh Hader wouldn't come in for a 4-out save while the Padres were still fighting for a playoff spot. That really marred his time in San Diego and probably left a sour taste in a lot of Padres fans' mouths as he now goes and heads into free agency. I'm sure Padres fans are ecstatic that they're getting something back when Josh Hader eventually leaves, but let's see how they did in acquiring him. The trade that sent Josh Hader from Milwaukee to San Diego at the 2022 trade deadline sent shockwaves throughout Major League Baseball. The Brewers were right in the heat of contention, and so were the Padres, and it didn't really make a ton of sense for a lot of people why the Brewers would trade a reliable closer. Yes, they had the likes of Devin Williams in their bullpen, who was slowly taking over that closer role, but having someone like Hader being a setup man to Devin Williams is a combination that a lot of teams would love to have come October. Although the Padres made it to the NLCS in 2022, neither team found a lot of postseason success outside of that. So now with the benefit of a little bit of hindsight, we can go ahead and examine the Josh Hader trade for both sides and see exactly what both teams got out of this deal. Again, Hader was an elite arm, an all-star closer, so the Padres had to give up a lot of prospect capital and even major league capital in order to get his services for a year and a half. So in this video, we'll examine the Josh Hader trade that sent him from Milwaukee to San Diego and exactly what the Brewers got back in return for his services. With both teams under new managers this year, it'll be really interesting to see how the talent that has been amassed from these trades is going to end up impacting both teams as they hopefully go for a deep postseason run once again. As always, as you see in probably every video, if you could hit that baseball right there or go in the description and hit the subscribe link to subscribe to the channel, it would be a big help. It really helps my channel grow and affirms that you like the content that I make. And not only will you get more content from me, you get it from other awesome baseball creators out there as well. Without further ado, let's examine the Josh Hader trade at the 2022 trade deadline and see how both teams have fared up to this point of the deal. Milwaukee knew their chances of re-signing Hader before 2023 were pretty slim, so they figured they might as well trade their closer even though he wasn't having a great year in 2022 to try and maximize their return. Hader had 29 saves going into this trade, and it might come as a shock that his numbers really did not back up that he was an elite pitcher. He had a 4.24 ERA, his FIP was a little bit lower at a 3.46, somewhat more respectable, but not great for a relieving pitcher in a high leverage situation. And although his strikeout rate was really high, 15.6, which is one of the highest of his entire career, he just wasn't putting it all together on the mound, and things weren't going great in Milwaukee. You might be thinking, well, he's just having a bad year, a change of scenery would be good for Hader, he is one of the best closers in the game, and you'd be right in 2023, but that really was not the case after the Padres acquired him. The wheels really started to fall off the wagon, his ERA jumped to 7.31, his whip was up by over 0.5 to 1.625, which is an absurd number, especially for a high leverage reliever. His hits per 9 innings jumped to almost 10, his walks per 9 innings jumped from 3.2 to 5.1, and he was striking out 3 less batters per 9 inning stretch, which is just absurd for a guy of his caliber. He really struggled in San Diego that first year, and it raised a lot of questions as to what his future was going to be and if he just cost himself a lot of money. For those of you who remember the All-Star game this year, you'll remember Hader was there, and that just goes to show you that he really turned things around in 2023. His ERA dropped to 1.28, which just goes to show you he hit his form well. No pitcher can have a 1.28 ERA without being absolutely dominant. Although he was still walking a lot of guys, about 4.8 per 9 innings, he wasn't striking out the same amount of guys as he was during his stretch in Milwaukee. He was still a really good reliever, and his FIP was actually about a whole point lower than what it was in San Diego the year prior. So things were really coming together for him and really is going to get him paid hugely this offseason. Although his work didn't help them win a World Series ring, it definitely helped the push to get to the playoffs in 2022, and although there was some controversy over his usage going into the 2023 playoffs, which they ended up missing, Hader is going to be a very, very valuable asset for a team going into next season. The biggest piece the Brewers got back in this deal was Esteury Ruiz, a former top 100 prospect who made his major league debut with the Padres earlier that season. He only had 9 at-bats with the Brewers, and you see 2 strikeouts, and his only highlight is his walk against Madison Bumgarner because he didn't get a single hit in those 9 at-bats with the Brewers. However, he was part of the Sean Murphy trade and got sent over to the Oakland A's and immediately became their everyday starting center fielder. I'm not going to spend too much time on Ruiz because, as I already mentioned, he only had 9 at-bats with Milwaukee, and I'm going to make a video on the Sean Murphy trade in the near future. So if you're watching this anytime after March 2024, that video is most likely already out, so go give that a watch as well. But for those who are curious, he broke the rookie stolen base record this year with the Oakland A's after missing about 30 games, so he has a ton of awesome speed, as you can see on display right here on your screen. He also has some really good defensive prowess. There's no doubt he's going to stick in center field in the long term, and the only reason he played a lot of the corner outfields in 2023 was because Lawrence Butler, another center fielder that the A's have, came up mid-season and ended up getting center field and pushed Ruiz out to the corners while he was hurt. You can see based on his stats, he's probably destined to be a 6, 7, 8 hole guy. He's not going to hit for a ton of power. He only had 5 home runs. He's not going to hit for a ton of average. He's not going to get on base a ton. Again, his .254 batting average is okay. His on-base percentage of .309 is okay, but those stolen bases add up, and you really don't want to have him at the bottom of your lineup unless you're employing like a Billy Hamilton strategy that kind of got implemented around 2016, 2017, where you get a quote-unquote extra leadoff hitter of a speedster guy, but that's been kind of phased out of the game. Ruiz is a really solid player, and although his hard hit percentage is just a shy below 20, and his strikeout percentage is just a shade below 20, which is pretty solid for a guy of his caliber who doesn't walk a ton, he's a decent player going forward, and the A's have a center fielder who they'll most likely rely on for a little bit before they potentially head to Las Vegas. Most baseball fans know the value of Josh Hader, which is why the Brewers needed to go and get another high-leverage reliever to go and complement him as they made their playoff push in 2022. That's exactly what Taylor Rodgers was. He was going to head into free agency after the season, and the Brewers were hoping that he'd be a good back-end bullpen piece, and similar to Hader, he hadn't had a great 2022 so far, so they were hoping they could unlock something out of him. Rodgers had 28 saves on the season, which was really good going into the trade deadline, and the numbers didn't back it up. It's a really similar situation to what Josh Hader had. He had a 4.35 ERA, and although he wasn't walking a ton of guys, only 2 per 9 innings, and striking out a ton, 10.5 per 9 innings, those results just weren't translating onto the diamond. If you look at his FIP, you'll see he was a little unlucky. His FIP in San Diego in 2022 was 2.34, so there was a lot of balls that just ended up not going his way once they got hit. That's part of the reason why Milwaukee thought they could break into something and potentially tap into a really good reliever who could replace Hader for the immediate future. And as most people know, with Joel Payamps and other players that they got in 2023, Hader was sufficiently replaced. But it's interesting to see exactly what Taylor Rodgers did in 2022 as he, again, was a free agent after the season. Well, you can see on the screen now that those numbers were not great by any means. A 5.48 ERA, and his FIP was 5.07, which means that he was just really a bad pitcher. It wasn't luck or anything like that. He just was not doing well. His WHIP jumped from 1.113 to over 1.3, which is a pretty big jump. It wasn't as sizable as Hader's, but it is still alarming. And although he was striking out a ton of batters, a career high 14.1 per 9 innings, it just was not enough. He was not doing a great job. He made as many saves as he blew, and it just did not work out in Milwaukee's favor, and that kind of showed in the postseason where they didn't make a deep run, mostly because they just didn't have the bullpen to go and support any leads that they had, and things just fell apart in 2022. With a quick update, he signed with San Francisco this offseason, put together a pretty solid record, 6-4, 3.83 ERA, and a non-closer role, and that seemed to really help. He found his stride a little bit more. He wasn't doing as great of a job as he did in his years in Minnesota, but he was a solid player and was someone that the Giants relied on as they tried to make a postseason push in 2023, and will probably be someone they rely on in 2024 to do the same thing. Bob Melvin is a phenomenal manager, and I have no doubt he'll use Rodgers to his full potential. You might be wondering why Dinelson Lamet, the guy on our screen who is also involved in this trade, doesn't have any video in a Brewers uniform. That's because he actually never played for the Brewers. Under 2 years after finishing 4th in NL Cy Young Award voting, he ended up being traded to the Brewers as a salary dump. He ended up being designated for assignment immediately following the trade and did not make a single appearance with the Brewers. Just take a look at his numbers to understand why he was such an easy candidate for the Padres, who at that time were still very interested in making the postseason, to get rid of him. A 9.49 ERA just does not cut it, and a whip above 2 is just absurd. There's not a single player in the major leagues who can support themselves on a whip of 2. That is just way too high. We've talked earlier about players who have a whip of 1.3, 1.4, which is already getting a little steady when you're getting into reliever territory. A starter can maybe support those numbers, but anything above 2, especially not a starter, you cannot support that. You are not able to go and eat any innings that way. He was deployed almost exclusively as a reliever, and that whip is just even worse for a reliever. You're meant to come in and dominate players and not allow runs and come in with maybe a man on first or second and get yourself out of a jam. And if you're allowing 2 walks or 2 hits per inning, you're not doing that. You are just letting runs come in on the board, and that is just not a way for your team to win. He was picked up by the Rockies after he got DFA'd, put up slightly better numbers, which is kind of ironic considering that Coors is not by any means a pitcher's park. Entered 2023, made the active roster, and just stunk with an ERA above 11.5, a whip above 2.3, just things fell apart for him. Got DFA'd, picked up by Boston, pitched in 1 game for 2 innings, did not look good, and now he's back as a free agent looking to find a new home. I wouldn't be shocked to see if he gets a minor league deal. He was really good in 2020. That wasn't that far away from where we were just a little bit ago, so maybe things come back. But as of right now, things are not looking good for Dinelson Lamet. The final player that the Brewers acquired in this deal was a true prospect and someone who hasn't made their major league debut yet, so there's still a little speculation, which as a prospect enjoyer, the point of this channel, I personally love. At the time of the deal, Robert Gasser was the top 10 prospect in the Padres organization, a really strong left-handed starter who they drafted in the competitive balance round B, 71st overall in the 2021 MLB draft. He started his collegiate career at New Mexico before transferring to junior college and then to the University of Houston, putting together a very strong senior season, which was a very big reason as to why he ended up getting selected as high as he did. Again, being picked in the competitive round B, 71 overall, is a very high spot, especially for a college pitcher who kind of just burst onto the scene. His big calling card is the fact that he has 4 pitches and none of them are really bad. His best pitch is by far his slider because it tunnels very well with his fastball and has some really good horizontal break. His changeup and cutter are both really respectable, and although they don't blow batters away, there's something he can use very well in a 4-pitch mix with that fastball and slider to go ahead and get hitters off balance. He also tends to manipulate his fastball into a sinker that hits around the low 90s, so it won't blow you away, but again, it's that technique and that control that really goes ahead and puts him ahead of other players. He does have some solid control. It's not amazing. He's not an elite control artist. He's not going to be able to paint the corners every time, but he's a lot better than a lot of some of the fringe prospects and other top 100 guys who have dominant stuff but just can't locate things. That does limit his floor a bit. A lot of times you'll see relievers who have really high octane stuff or a dominant pitch get turned into relievers if they can't cut it out as a starter. And although Gasser is someone who could potentially be a really good, maybe number 2, number 3 starter in his major league career, the fact he doesn't have a lot of velocity and he doesn't have a true wipeout pitch doesn't bode well for his ability to be a high leverage reliever in the future. If something happens, maybe a Tommy John surgery or another arm injury that requires him to have to reduce his innings in the long term and move to a reliever role, I wouldn't expect him to see him earning any holds or saves in the immediate future. Although his stuff is good, it's not elite, and that's exactly what you want in a back-end guy. Control is nice, but it doesn't often translate to success in a hold or save situation. It's more suited for a middle relief role, trying to go ahead and keep a 5-3 lead in the 6th inning. I would very much expect him to make Milwaukee's rotation at some point in 2024. He already reached AAA last season, spent his entire season there with a 9-1 record and a 3.97 ERA. He looked really, really good, and although batters were putting the ball on a little bit more than they'd like, a 236 average against, he wasn't allowing a lot of walks, which is a phenomenal sign, and struck out about 10 batters per 9 innings, so he has all the pieces to be a good player. With Brandon Woodruff now not on the team anymore, Corbin Burns being floated around in trade rumors, I wouldn't be shocked to see Robert Gasser potentially even make the opening day roster as a starter in the 4th or 5th slot in the rotation. It would also be very easy to extend this trade and include what Esteury Ruiz got traded for in the trade that sent Sean Murphy from Oakland to Atlanta because that was a 3-team deal. In that case, you can include William Contreras, who was absolutely dominant in 2023, Joel Payamps, who was a phenomenal hold getter for the Brewers, and they got rid of Manny Pena, who was not very good for Oakland and frankly wasn't a huge success there, and Esteury Ruiz, who They have a lot of outfield prospects and people coming up. Jackson Chourio is a great example. They didn't have a ton of space in the outfield to keep Ruiz, with Yelich and Chourio and other players coming up and being really good pieces for them going and contending. But this trade for both teams was a very interesting one because it seems like kind of neither have truly panned out exactly how each team had hoped. Taylor Rodgers wasn't a replacement for Josh Hader like the Brewers had wanted, and Josh Hader did not pan out in 2022 like the Padres wanted him to, and 2023 didn't matter because they didn't make the postseason. This is a very interesting trade to look back on, even though it's only been about a season and a half since it's happened. A lot can happen in the future, and who knows how Robert Gass will end up turning out. There's a lot of potential for him to be a very solid starter, and that could very easily shift things in the Brewers' favor for this deal. So thank you guys for getting to the end of this video. It really means a lot. There's going to be 2 videos that are going to pop up here on your screen, both by me. It'd be awesome if you're interested in either of those to go ahead and watch them. And of course, that baseball is going to be right there at the bottom to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you're not on your TV, you can go ahead and do that in the description or by hitting the down button and hitting my baseball, which will take you to the channel. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.